But let's get started with Major League Baseball, and perhaps the biggest surprise in all of the postseason is the fact that none of these series appeared to go 3 games. Fortunately, we did get one between the Mets and Brewers, but the Atlanta Braves, just too many injuries for them, and they get exited last night. The Padres end up winning that game 5-4. Atlanta ended up rallying late in this game, but needless to say, it has been Petco and San Diego that has carried them to the finish line here. Fernando Tatis Jr. and company. Now they have a date set up with the Los Angeles Dodgers in the next round. You know how that has gone through the years. The National League West foes will face off against each other coming up this weekend. Also, for the first time since 2016, the Houston Astros are not headed to the American League Championship Series as they lose to the upstart Detroit Tigers. They win 2 games in a row in Houston. Final score 5-2 yesterday, as Detroit just too hot to handle right now going into September, going into October. Detroit is just 1 series away from getting to the World Series, and a lot of questions surrounding Houston's future. But for now, Joe Espada, the manager of the Astros, staying in the present, proud of what the team accomplished.
Yeah, it's tough. But I want our guys to be proud of how far we've come. Like, it was a very challenging season. And, we reached the postseason, something that that's our goal every year. Is we win the division and then play deep into the playoffs. And it didn't happen for us this year. But I want our guys to be proud of their resiliency and how tough this season was, and how, we're just talking in there about, you got Jordan playing with an injured knee, and, we trying to figure out ways to piece it together throughout the whole entire season. Injuries, young pitchers coming up and stepping up, young players coming up and being part of the process that we have in place, right? There's so many great things that we did that I don't want us to hang our head down just because of the way the season ended. No, we should be proud of what we accomplished and how we did it. I think the process is important.
After the game, Justin Verlander said he continues to decide what he will do next season, but it will be pitching for somewhere and someone next season. Wasn't really clear on exactly what he's going to do. He's going to be a free agent after the season. All right, the Baltimore Orioles, they were completely shut down by the Kansas City Royals pitching, as now the Royals have moved on to the next round of Major League Baseball postseason. A final 2-1 yesterday, as the Orioles managed just 1 run in 2 games. One of the best offenses in Major League Baseball over the regular season did not show itself in the postseason, and Kansas City is moving on yet again. Also, as we move forward and get to the Mets and Brewers, it's apparent that Jackson Chourio is the star of the show for the Brewers thus far. 2 home runs yesterday, and then a big home run late from Garrett Mitchell as the Brewers come back to beat the Mets and force Game 3 in that series. As of right now, this is the lone series that appears to be the most exciting. Now, again, anything can happen the rest of the postseason, but this has been very much back and forth in both games, and the Brewers end up winning this one late. Not just thanks to Chourio, says manager Pat Murphy. A lot of others contributed as well.
Adames has been doing it all year. He wasn't working on a good 2 games here, and then all of a sudden, 2 strikes in his last at bat, gets a knock. Sal's been that guy all year. He's pesky and gets things done. Turang has been, you guys have watched it. He's been terrific for, he's emerged as a real player. So there's been guys that have been clutch at times. Joey Ortiz has been clutch at times, not today. But is there that? I think guys that play long enough and get in that situation a lot realize they can keep it under control and perform. And then you got to, other things, if you're forcing it to happen, it doesn't happen. The clutch guys let it happen and meet the game halfway. And, Jackson has a way of at a young age, he doesn't know any better. That's beautiful.
20 years old, Jackson Chourio. Speaking of rookies, another rookie's going to start tonight from Milwaukee. Tobias Myers is on the mound as the Brewers are slight favorites this evening against the New York Mets. By the way, this game begins at 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight. All right, a quick note here about BetMGM. There's a recent audit on their sports betting company by Gaming Labs. Their international revealed a number of non-compliance issues in Massachusetts. An Investigation and Enforcement Bureau spokesperson detailed some results of the ongoing audit to the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, reporting the sports betting operator accepted a number of prohibited player prop bets on NCAA football, player props, and on men's and women's college basketball, and also on some prohibited Belarusian sports leagues. So keep an eye on this story. We'll touch on it with Legal Sports Report coming up in just a bit. In the NFC South tonight, it's a matchup between two teams hoping to win the division, the Bucks and the Falcons. Right now, Atlanta is minus 1.5 point favorites over on the FanDuel Sportsbook. We'll have that game covered for you tonight on SportsGrid. Jalen Phillips is out for the season, the very good edge rusher for the Miami Dolphins. He has a partially torn ACL. David Andrews, the center for the Patriots, he's going to undergo shoulder surgery and likely miss the rest of the season as well. And the Dallas Cowboys take on the Pittsburgh Steelers minus one of their star wide receivers this week, as Brandon Cooks had an infection in his knee and is going to miss the game this week, and Jalen Tolbert will start for him at wide receiver this week. All right, over to some college football news and notes. Four-star quarterback Deuce Knight, ESPN's number 2 dual-threat passer in the 2025 cycle, has flipped his pledge from Notre Dame to Auburn on Wednesday night, giving Hugh Freeze one of the nation's top classes as Notre Dame loses another quarterback. Tonight in college football, not the sexiest game on the board, let's be honest. Texas State, 13.5-point road favorites against Troy, and Sam Houston State will take on UTEP tonight, with Sam Houston State 10.5-point road favorites, total of 50.5. News from the sports betting operator, one that you may be familiar with overseas, Betfred, has departed to depart another state here in the United States. This time it is leaving Virginia. The latest exit leaves Arizona, Iowa, and Pennsylvania as the only states where the UK bookmaker currently operates. Betfred will cease operations in Virginia on October the 21st. Meanwhile, Ohio's August sports betting handle has risen 45% year after year, combined to generate a $548 million handle. That's 44% up from last year. Mavericks' Luka Doncic, as the NBA preseason gets underway, is going to sit out a week with a calf injury. There's no concern about him being available for their season opener, which is on October 24th against Wemby and the San Antonio Spurs. Also, some sad notes from golf right now, as Hall of Famer Susie Maxwell Burning has passed away at the age of 83. She had a 2-year battle with lung cancer. The LPGA said Burning, inducted into the Hall of Fame, passed away at her home in Palm Springs. She won the U.S. Open in 1968, 1972, and then 1973 as well. Welcome back to Newswire here on SportsGrid. Matthew Waters is our guest contributor today from LegalSportsReport.com, and you can read all about the stories we discuss over at the website. Once again, that's LegalSportsReport.com. Matt, welcome back to the show today. Just what I wanted to start off with today, betting on the upcoming election. All right, let's do this. Let's get it out of the way here. I mean, my gosh, as if I don't see enough ads all over my TV or my phone or social media or everywhere else. I feel like this is my respite from that, this 1 hour that we do here on Newswire, but you gotta lock me in here. Anyway, who's taking bets here on the upcoming election? And is this a company in the United States? Because I know that this was prohibited in the past.
Yeah, so Calshi is, and what happens, Craig, we've had a little bit of a story here. I'll give you some background. Basically, Calshi allows for the trading of futures commodities. That's not just elections and political stuff. You can bet on how many Teslas will be delivered. You can bet on whether Bitcoin is going to hit a new high. So there's all kinds of things that you can bet on Calshi. And they basically said, look, predicting an election, that is really no different. And so they went to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and they said, look, we're going to do this. And they thought that they were okay to do it because a smaller operation had been given an okay to do something similar. The problem with that kind of popped up, though, is Calshi is trying to make it a lot bigger, right? Some people will be allowed to bet up to 100 million with Calshi, whereas the other program, Predicted, it was capped at, I think it's $850. So it's vastly different that way. But basically, the DC Court of Appeals ruled that Calshi should not be prevented from taking these election bets while this case is being heard by the DC Court of Appeals. The CFTC tried to say that there would be irreparable harm if this election betting was allowed during this presidential race. The attorney for the CFTC basically said, the harm to the public is going to be profound at a time, and I don't mean to be dramatic, but Americans broadly believe that our democracy is under threat. But the three judge panel, they just didn't see it that way. They said that the CFTC didn't make a good enough case that there will be harm. Now, they said that they're not necessarily far away from showing there could be harm. They just have to get more specific. They have to show something like, if a political campaign started to encourage people to buy these, that would be an issue, right? If we had foreign investors who were somehow bypassing the know your customer stuff with Calshi and making, different bids and driving up a market this way or that way, that would be an issue. But the CFTC wasn't able to show that any of this will definitively happen if Calshi is allowed to take these bets. So, look, the case is still ongoing. There's just not the stay. And the CFTC asked for a expedited schedule on this, but oral arguments under that schedule wouldn't be heard until December, Craig. So it looks like unless they can come back and really prove that something can go wrong immediately with Calshi, that this election betting will stay open through the U.S. election. And then we'll figure it out from there, right? We'll still have to have the case, and we'll still have to see if we're able to do this the next time around. But it's an interesting case. It's an interesting situation when you talk about a website that's used for, you can say if Chapel Roan is going to have a #1 album or not. And now we're talking about betting on the election as well. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and I'm sure after the election there'll be no controversy as to who won, who lost, and I'm sure that people won't be screaming for their money one way or the other. I mean, good luck, good luck taking those bets on the election. Wouldn't be me. All right, so our next story is one that it seems to have at least one company in the sports betting space salty at another. Basically, an employee goes from one to the other, signs initially, it looks like with a non-compete, and now the other company wants to enforce this. So tell us more about the story. I don't want to ruin it. By the way, you can read it again at legalsportsreport.com. Do you think that there is a leg to stand on with this non-compete, and why is there such a battle with this one individual?
You know what, Craig? There's such a battle right now because VIP is so important when it comes to sports betting. We saw earlier this year, maybe one or two customers shift from one book to another in New Jersey, and it had a substantial impact. So when Fanatics hired Michael Hermelin away from DraftKings to be the head of their VIP program, which is what he was doing at DraftKings, Fanatics thought that they had it in the bag, that this was a guy who was really doing well for DraftKings. DraftKings had kept him on and gave him bonus after bonus to keep him and his team, and Fanatics got him. The only problem with that is that he had a non-compete. He attempted to go around that by moving to California and saying, look, California doesn't allow these non-competes. And I tried to rely on some case law that basically didn't hold up in appeals court. They were trying to say that he should not be prevented from working in California. The rest of the U.S. fine, but not in California where he's based out of. The appeals court essentially said, well, that doesn't exactly pass the smell test because California does not have legal online betting or gambling or online casino. So naturally, the nature of his business would take him outside of California then to have relationships and build relationships with customers that do not live in California and would be betting on DraftKings or on Fanatics, in another state. So they found that this is correct, that he should be boxed out of working in the sports betting VIP category for Fanatics. Now, he is clear to do other things. And Fanatics is not just a betting company, right? They have VIPs in other areas. So I would have to assume that Mr. Hermelin is working some area of that VIP program that touches on, the thousands of other things that Fanatics does. But he technically is not allowed to work with sports betting VIP customers until February 1 of this upcoming year, Craig.
All right, so they're going to enforce that long-term non-compete there. Okay, fair enough. Well, one of the figures in the daily fantasy space and now in the sports betting space in the future, it was Nigel Eccles. For the people who are unfamiliar with him, he founded FanDuel going back, approximately a decade ago, ended up selling it. I'm sure he cashed in quite well, but now is the subject of another story that you guys have up here over at LegalSports.com, where there's some allegations that right before he sold, he may have tried to hamper with the company and dampen some of the future aspirations for it. What happened here?
Well, what happened, Craig, and we know this because DraftKings and FanDuel attempted to merge at one point, right? And it was basically because both of the companies were burning cash like you wouldn't believe. And so what happened here is that when FanDuel was sold to Paddy Power Betfair, it's now the Flutter company, the valuation was taken at a level that Nigel Eccles and other shareholders didn't see as fair. And this is now the other shareholders' chances to say why that valuation was fair and why it clicked. And they're alleging that Nigel Eccles, the co-founder of FanDuel, essentially drove the business into the ground. Now, I don't know if he drove the business into the ground, Craig. I think that Nigel is great at what he did, and I think that there was a very tough operating environment going on in the 2016-2017 for DFS that we're talking about when these negotiations were going down. One of the things, though, is that this deal closed right after PASPA fell in the U.S., but the deal was contingent on not letting that outcome impact the valuation. And so we heard from the defendants at this point. We have to see what the court is going to do. But, Craig, I think you would be surprised asking anybody familiar with FanDuel to find that one of the co-founders from FanDuel got nothing when the company was sold.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. I met Nigel when FanDuel first started many, many years ago here in South Florida when they were just operating the daily fantasy space. All right, interesting note. We'll read more about it, LegalSportsReport.com. Matt, have a great rest of your week. Good luck to your Phillies this weekend. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, sir. Take care.